Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I pulled a story straight from the depths of Reddit. The kind of story that starts slow and then refuses to let go. It's unsettling, personal, and once you hear it, you won't forget it. So get comfortable, turn the lights down, and let's begin. I have worked as 911 operator for 10 years. This call is the reason I resigned and checked myself into a psychiatric ward. When you do this job for 10 years, you develop a sort of mental callus. You hear the screams, the car crunches, the sobbing parents, and the panicked breathing, but you learn to tuck it all away into a little box at the back of your brain, just so you can eat dinner. When you get home, I thought my box was indestructible. I'd handled the 2018 freeway pileup and a dozen domestic calls. That would make most people lose their lunch. And I did it all with a steady voice and a clear head. But then came a Tuesday night in November, the kind of quiet shift where the air in the dispatch room feels stagnant and heavy. 911, what is the address of your emergency? I said, leaning back in my ergonomic chair, my head set slightly tight against my temple. There was no screaming. There wasn't even the sound of wind or a struggle. There was just a rhythmic, wet clicking sound. It sounded like someone tapping a pen against a piece of raw steak. Hello? This is 911 dispatch. Do you have an emergency? I asked again, my professional mask firmly in place. I signaled to my supervisor, Sarah, that I had a potential silent caller. She started tracing the GPS coordinates. Immediately, it's in the walls now. A voice finally whispered. It was a woman's voice, but it sounded hollow, like she was speaking from the bottom of a very deep well. The phone is ringing inside the walls, and I can't make it stop. Nam, I need you to tell me your name and where you are, I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The GPS hit came back to a farmhouse out in the rural part of the county, a place miles away from the nearest neighbor. Are you hurt? Is there someone in the house with you? I'm not hurt, she said, and I heard a soft, chilling giggle that made the hair on my arms stand up. But the operator he's been on the line for such a long time. Don't you remember me? Mark. My heart stopped. My name is Mark. But I hadn't given it to her. We don't give our names. Ever. It's a safety protocol. I looked over at Sarah, and her face had gone completely pale. She was staring at her monitor, her mouth hanging open. Mark, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. The trace, it's not coming from a farmhouse. Where is it coming from? I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. The clicking sound on the other end of the line was getting louder, faster. It's coming from right here, Sarah said, pointing at the screen. The call is originating from console 4. Your console, Mark. The line is coming from inside your own headset. I ripped the headset off my ears and threw it onto the desk. The plastic clattered against the wood, but the voice didn't stop, even with the headset lying 3 feet away. I could hear her whisper, echoing through the speakers of the entire dispatch center. Why did you hang up on me? 10 years ago, Mark, I told you it was dark in the cellar. Suddenly, the lights in the dispatch room flickered and died, plunging us into the red glow of emergency backup power. And in that dim, bloody light, I saw the caller ID on my monitor change. It didn't show a phone number anymore. It just showed a date. November 12th, 2016. The exact date of the only call I ever failed to trace. The call that had haunted my dreams. For a decade, the air in the dispatch center turned freezing. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill your skin, but feels like it's sinking into your marrow. I stared at that date on the screen. November 12th, 2016. It was the night of the Henderson fire. A young woman named Claire had called from a basement, trapped behind a jammed door, while the house above her turned into an oven. I had stayed on the line with her for 42 minutes, listening to the roar of the flames and her coughing until the line finally went dead. We never found her. The fire was so hot, it leveled the structure, and investigators said the cellar had collapsed into a pit of ash. Mark, get away from the desk. Sarah hissed, her voice shaking. She was backed up against the break room door, her eyes fixed on my console. I wanted to move. Every instinct I had as a human being told me to run for the exit, but my feet felt like they were bolted to the floor. The clicking sound was coming from the headset again, but it wasn't just audio anymore. The long coil cord of the headset began to move, slithering across the desk like a black snake. It wasn't falling. It was being pulled. I waited for the sirens. Mark, the voice whispered from the desk, sounding wetter now, more choked with soot. You told me they were coming. You promised me. The red lights were just around the corner, but the only red I saw was the ceiling melting. I sent them. Claire, I screamed at the empty desk, my professional composure disintegrating into raw, jagged grief. The bridge was out from the storm. They couldn't get the trucks over the creek. I stayed on the line. I didn't leave you, but you went home. The voice rasped. The headset cord suddenly snapped taut, and the monitor on my desk began to crack. Spidery lines raced across the glass, and a thick, black fluid started oozing from the screen. You went home, and you ate dinner, and you slept. Do you know how hard it is to sleep when your lungs are full of charcoal? Suddenly, the emergency line on console 5 lit up, then console 6, then every single station in the room started ringing simultaneously. The sound was deafening, a chorus of digital screams that filled the small space. Sarah covered her ears, sinking to her knees, but I couldn't look away. From my screen, the black fluid was forming shapes now, letters pressing against the inside of the cracked glass. Help me. I reached out, my hand moving as if possessed, and grabbed the headset. The moment the plastic touched my skin, a jolt of static electricity slammed through my arm, but I didn't let go. I put the piece to my ear. I didn't hear a woman anymore. I heard the crackle of burning timber. I heard the whistle of a draft pulling heat into a confined space. And underneath it all, I heard a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. It was slow, impossibly slow, like a clock running out of batteries. Mark. A new voice came through, a man's voice this time. It was deep, distorted, and sounded like it was being filtered through a mouthful of dirt. She's not the only one who didn't get out. We're all still on hold, and we've been waiting for a supervisor to take the call. The floorboards beneath my chair began to groan. In this high-tech, concrete-reinforced building, the floor shouldn't have been able to groan, but as I watched, the linoleum tiles began to buckle and peel back. Something was pushing up from underneath. A hand, charred, black, and missing 2 fingers, thrust through the floor, gripping the leg of my chair. Mark, run. Sarah screamed, but when I looked at her, she wasn't Sarah anymore. Her face was blurring, her features sliding away like melting wax, leaving behind a smooth, featureless mask of skin. I realized then that I wasn't the dispatch center anymore. The walls were still there, the computers were still humming, but the reality of the room was being overwritten by a memory. The smell of ozone was replaced by the cloying, sweet scent of burnt meat. You're the connection, Mark. The voice of the man said, as long as you're on the line, the door stays open. If you want us to stop, you just have to come down here and hang up the phone yourself. The hand on my chair pulled, and the entire console, the desk, the monitors, the $3,000 chair began to sink into the floor as if the concrete had turned into quicksand. I tried to scramble away, but the headset cord was wrapped around my neck now, tightening with every inch. The desk sank. 911. I gasped, the world turning gray, as the cord choked the life out of me. What is your emergency? The emergency is you, Mark. Claire's voice whispered right against my ear. You're the one who survived, and that's a call we need to disconnect. The descent felt like it lasted a lifetime, a sickening drop through a tunnel of static and smoke. When I finally hit the ground, the impact didn't break my bones. It felt like landing on a mountain of old, discarded clothes. But as I scrambled to sit up, the smell hit me, the dusty, metallic scent of a basement that hadn't seen air in a century. I wasn't in the dispatch center anymore. I was in a room that shouldn't exist. The walls were lined with thousands of old-fashioned telephone switchboards, their wires tangled like a mass of black veins, and they were all bleeding. A thick, dark sludge dripped from the jacks, pooling on the floor, around my boots. Where am I? I shouted, my voice cracking. You're in the archive, Mark. A voice echoed. It was Claire, but she sounded closer now. I looked up and saw her. She was standing in the corner, illuminated by the flickering light of a single, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a 24-year-old girl in a sundress, except for the fact that her skin was the color of ash, and her eyes were just empty, dark sockets. This is where the calls go when they don't end, she said, stepping toward me. Her movements were jerky, like a film strip, missing every third frame. Every time you told someone, help is on the way, and it didn't arrive, a new wire grew. In this room, you've been building this place for 10 years, one promise at a time. I looked at the walls, and my stomach turned. I saw little plastic tags hanging from the wires. I crawled closer and read one. June 14th, 2019. Domestic, Unit 4B. Too late. Another one. August 3rd, 2021. Cardiac arrest. Operator error. I did my best. I whispered, tears blurring my vision. I'm just a man. I can't control the traffic, or the weather, or how fast the ambulances drive. I gave everything to that headset. I lost my marriage, my sleep, my sanity, all for people I never even met. We know. Another voice said. A man stepped out from behind a row of switchboards. He was wearing a police uniform from the 70s, his chest crushed inward as if by a heavy weight. We know you cared, Mark. That's why you're here. The ones who don't care, they don't build archives. Their wires just wither and die. But you kept us all alive. In your head, you fed us your guilt. For breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He reached out and touched a wire, and suddenly the room was filled with the sound of a woman screaming for her baby. It was a call from 3 years ago. I remembered it perfectly. The mother had been hysterical, and I had stayed calm, but the baby hadn't made it. Stop it. I yelled, cover my ears. Please, just stop. We can't stop. Claire said, standing right in front of me now. She reached out and touched my cheek. Her hand was freezing, but it felt strangely comforting. The only way to stop the noise is to close the circuit. You've been the battery for this whole place. Mark, but batteries eventually run out. She pointed to the center of the room where a massive, ancient-looking telephone sat on a pedestal, made of charred wood. The handset was off the hook, dangling by a frayed cord. "That's your first call," she said, "the one you failed to trace. On November 12th, 2016, all you have to do is hang it up, but you have to mean it. You have to let go of the guilt or the line stays open forever." I walked toward the pedestal, my legs heavy as lead. Every step I took, the voices got louder. It wasn't just screams anymore. It was the quiet, desperate pleas of thousands of people. "Don't leave me. Please stay on the line. I'm scared." I reached for the handset. My hand was inches away when the room suddenly shifted. The walls of the cellar vanished, and for a second, I was back in the burning house. In 2016, I could see the orange glow of the fire through the floorboards above. I could smell the melting plastic, and I saw Claire, the real Claire, huddled in the corner of the basement, holding a cell phone to her ear. "Mark," she whispered, looking right at me. "Are they here yet? It's getting really hot." I froze. This wasn't a memory. It felt like I was actually there. I had the power to talk to her, to tell her something, anything that might change things. "Claire," I sobbed, reaching out for her. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," she said, her voice small and brave. "Just tell me a story. Tell me about the sun. I can't remember what it looks like." The handset in the archive began to vibrate, a low, ominous hum that shook the floor beneath my feet. I realized then that if I hung up the phone, I was killing her all over again. I was choosing to walk away and leave her in the fire. But if I didn't, I would be trapped in this cellar of ghosts until my body in the real world withered away. "Mark, look at the monitor." A voice hissed. I looked down at the phone in my hand, and the caller ID didn't say Claire's name anymore. It said, "Mark's life." The heat in the memory was becoming unbearable, a physical wall of fire that felt like it was blistering the very thoughts in my head. I looked at Claire, cowering in that basement, with the phone pressed to her ear, and then I looked at the black receiver in my hand. The voices in the archive were reaching a crescendo, a hurricane of grief that threatened to tear my mind apart. "I can't do it," I whispered, the tears evaporating off my cheeks before they could even fall. "I can't just hang up on you again." "Mark, look at me," Claire said. She stood up, and for a second, the soot and the shadows vanished. She looked like she was standing in the middle of a sun-drenched meadow, even as the rafters above her turned to charcoal. "You didn't kill me. The fire did. You were just the voice that held my hand while I walked through the door. But you've stayed in the doorway for 10 years, and you're blocking the light for everyone else." I looked at the walls of the archive, at the thousands of wires dripping with black sludge. I realized then that my guilt wasn't a tribute to the people I'd lost. It was a cage I'd built for them by refusing to move on, by staying trapped in that November night. In 2016, I was keeping all of them trapped in their final, terrifying moments. "If I hang up," I choked out, "does it mean I'm forgetting you?" "No," she said, her voice fading as the roar of the fire grew deafening. "It means you're finally letting us rest, and it means you get to breathe again." I took a deep breath, the air tasting like ozone and ancient dust, and I slammed the receiver onto the hook. The sound wasn't a click. It was a thunderclap. The archive shattered. The switchboards exploded into a million shards. of glass and plastic, and the black wires shriveled up like burnt hair. The cellar, the fire, the smell of smoke, it all dissolved into a blinding, pure white light that felt like a physical weight being lifted off my shoulders. I woke up screaming. I wasn't in the dispatch center, and I wasn't in a cellar. I was strapped to a bed in the psychiatric wing of the county hospital. The lights were fluorescent and sterile, and the only sound was the steady, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. A nurse rushed in, her face etched with concern. Mark, it's okay. You're safe. You're in the hospital. Sarah, I rasped, my throat feeling like it had been scrubbed with sandpaper. Where's Sarah? The nurse paused, her hand on the foreline. She gave me a look, a profound pity. Mark, Sarah hasn't worked at the dispatch center in 3 years. She retired after the freeway pileup. You were alone in the room when the paramedics found you. I was alone. You had a complete psychological break. She said softly, the police report says you were found sitting at console 4, disconnected from the system, screaming into a headset that wasn't even plugged in. You'd been there for 12 hours. I lay back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling. They told me it was a delayed stress response, a textbook case of PTSD, fueled by a decade of secondary trauma. They gave me pills to stop the dreams and therapy to reprocess the memories. And on the surface, it worked. I don't hear the clicking anymore. I don't smell the smoke. But I resigned. The day I was discharged, I can go back to a world where I had to listen to the moments that define the end of a life. I work at a library now. It's quiet. People only whisper, and the only emergencies are lost library cards or overdue books. However, there's one thing I never told the doctors. The reason I know it wasn't just a hallucination. When they handed me my personal effects in a plastic bag, my wallet, my keys, my watch, I found something else. At the bottom of the bag, it was a small, charred piece of plastic, melted and blackened by extreme heat. I took it out and realized it was a button from a 911 dispatch console. On the back, etched in tiny, jagged letters that looked like they'd been scratched in with a fingernail, was a single word: thanks. I still keep it in my pocket. It's a reminder that even in the silence, someone is listening. And sometimes the hardest call to handle is the one you have to make to yourself. Outro, that is the story of why I can never pick up a headset again. Doing that job changes you in ways you can't even explain. To people who haven't been there, it's like carrying 1,000 different lives in your pocket, and eventually the weight just becomes too much. What would you have done in Mark's shoes? Could you have hung up that phone knowing it was the only thing connecting you to the past? Or would you have stayed in the archive forever? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. I'm really interested to see how this one hit you. If you want more stories about the hidden side of the jobs we take for granted, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, you never know who's on the other end of the line.